welcome to video number 3 out of 6 for my YouTube project for my Issues in Women's Studies class. This video we're going to be talking about chapter 3, which is called Gender and Global Governance. Basically what the chapter entails is it goes over a lot of statistics of how world politics how different genders, specifically women, have roles in government or positions of control, positions of power in the world. And even more so than the recognition of them being in power is moreover the recognition of them not having the same power and the strife to be equal in that aspect of global governance. The majority of the chapter is very analytical. It's just basically a long analysis of gender equality, or the not so much in world politics that we see. It gives you a lot of numbers, a lot of statistics on specific percentages on women influence or gender diversity in politics, and like I said, in positions of control and amongst government positions in the world. For instance, how it kind of goes over like how women have a higher chance of being in government control or government power in the U.S. rather than in Arab nations. It also gives examples of how women in history have been very much so in power, such as Cleopatra, Queen Elizabeth, etc. And the list goes on, but in today's general government stance, women don't have that same overall influence in government. There is there is a table on page 102 of the book, and it goes back to the concept that we talked about in the last chapter of it being a lot of things being masculinized versus feminized, whatever. But it often has that sense of combativeness amongst sex as opposed to understanding of spectrum of gender. So a lot of things are either or as opposed to this or this or this or this or this. You get me? So on the masculinized side versus the feminine side, it's like political versus apolitical, reason versus emotion, public versus private, leaders versus followers, active versus passive, elite versus non-elite, power over versus power to, high politics versus low politics, hard politics versus soft politics. So these are the comparisons that general gender divisions of power productive to or of the crisis of representation are facing. This is the crisis of representation that goes back to what the two other crises that we discussed in chapter 1 or video 1, that were sustainability and insecurity. So with that being said, it's just one of those large concerns that are on a global scale that represent an issue because of these idealized ideologies that we place on men versus women as opposed to the gender spectrum and the lack of representation for so. There are often these stereotypes that, as we discussed last chapter as well, last video, of women being hyper emotional, where men are more based on reason, as reflected in the table that I just discussed. And so, and etc. There are multiple different examples of this, as I just said, but it then becomes more so a issue of gender conformity, where women feel as if they have to conform to the expectations of a man, and not necessarily even so much their expectations, but to embody these masculine tendencies to be able to fit within higher government. And this is where the issue lies, because we have women trying to overcompensate and diminish their femininity and overcome that and become more masculine to embody these qualities that men claim that they desire amongst these government positions or positions of power, period, that women, they just don't naturally embody. So we come across this situation where women, it doesn't work for them to be themselves, to be naturally all of these qualities that I said: apolitical, emotional, private, wanting to not necessarily be submissive, be passive, and to be non-elite, power to and go through soft politics and low politics in opposition to what men typically do. So they are trying to combat these natural tendencies, and from there it becomes a issue of self-identification, like, because at the end of the day, they're women and they're never going to be seen as men because they're not men. So they're trying to go through this gender conformity and still aren't being seen as equals, regardless of the progression or the digression that we make amongst different nations. Whether, it may rise from 20% to 50% or 20% to 30%, which is definitely an improvement, which are the statistics that the chapter goes over. We want to see improvement. However, there's not that complete 50-50, and not even close to being 50-50 that we were striving for. So is, according to the UN, there is a quote from the book. It says, the bad news, according to the UN, women, is that women unemployment rose dramatically between 2007 and 2010 in the wake of the 2008 economic crisis. And given that women are the majority of those in vulnerable work, women still are disproportionately the poorest of the poor, and food insecurity is rising, making for more hungry people in the world. So, with 50, we acknowledge that the population is 50% male, 50% female, with female being actually closer to 52% and male being closer to 48%. It's just, a little bit more women than men, but about 50-50. And so with half of our nation being just deemed impoverished based on their sex is alarming. So it's like, no matter the efforts that women make to conform, to have this gender conformity, they will never be seen in the light of a man. Like, they're never going to be seen as a man because they're not a man. So the issue has to we have to redirect that from women needing to take on masculine roles to changing that to global governance needs to accept female tendencies and accept that women have ruled in the past. Women can rule. It's just these male, masculine, hyper masculine, almost egocentric ways that are preventing women from doing so, that we have seen time and time again, and that is the issue that needs to be realigned for the future. So that was over chapter 3, gender and global governance. Like I said, it was a lot of statistics. It wasn't a lot of opinion part of it, except for the gender conformity parts of it. There were a couple other things that could be debated about, but that was what stuck out most to me and what I felt like I could contribute to the most. So yeah, hope to see you in next video, chapter 4, which will be over gender and global security.